They say that a mother's love is the only thing in this world that comes with no conditions. A mother will bleed to keep her child warm. She will starve to ensure her child is fed. I spent 30 years of my life believing that if you pour your heart into raising a son, he will become your shield when your hair turns gray and your hands begin to shake. But I was wrong. How terribly wrong I was. My name is Margaret, and tonight I am sitting in a tiny, freezing room on the edge of the city. The rain is beating mercilessly against the cracked window pane, and the only warmth I have is a cup of cheap tea and a faded wool blanket. This place is called Autumn Grace. It is an old age home, a place where society puts people when they are no longer useful. But society didn't put me here. My own flesh and blood did. My son David. He didn't just throw me out of the house I built with my own sweat and tears. He did it with a smile on his face, holding the hand of the woman who convinced him that his mother was nothing but a burden. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully controlled my life, trapped my assets, and pushed me into a dark corner to die alone. As I look at the old clock ticking on the wall, a cold smile comes across my face. David thinks he knows everything about me. He thinks I am just a broken, elderly woman crying in the dark. He has no idea what I quietly prepared before the doors of that limousine slammed in my face. He has no idea that the money he is trying so desperately to control doesn't even exist anymore in the way he thinks. But to understand the trap I have set for my own son, you have to understand how a boy who used to hold my thumb to cross the street turned into a monster. And it all started on a late-night call that changed the trajectory of my life forever. For 28 years, it was just David and me. His father passed away when David was just a toddler. I worked 3 different jobs. I cleaned offices in the morning, served food at a local diner in the afternoon, and spent my nights managing the accounting books for a small local textile mill. Every single penny I earned went into 2 things: David's education and buying a beautiful 3-bedroom brick house in the suburbs. That house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was my trophy. It proved that a single mother could survive the storm. David grew up to be successful. He got a high-paying corporate job, and for a while, he was the loving son I always prayed for. But then, she entered his life. Her name was Vanessa. Vanessa was younger, sharp, and possessed eyes that always seemed to be calculating the price of everything in the room. The first time David brought her to our home for dinner, she didn't look at the family photos or appreciate the warm meal I spent 5 hours cooking. She looked at the hardwood floors, the crown molding, and the size of the backyard. "Your mother lives here all by herself?" Vanessa had whispered to David in the hallway, not realizing I was standing right around the corner in the kitchen, holding a tray of desserts. "David, this property is worth at least $1 million. Why is she wasting all this space when we are renting a cramped apartment downtown?" That was the first red flag. But I ignored it because I loved my son, and I wanted him to be happy. Soon, David began to change. The polite, gentle boy became distant. He stopped sitting with me for breakfast. He would come home late, his face tense, spending hours whispering on the phone in his room. One evening, around midnight, I walked down the hallway to get a glass of water. David's door was slightly open. I could hear Vanessa's voice coming through the speakerphone. It was sharp, demanding, and full of manipulation. "David, you need to be smart," Vanessa said. "If you want to buy into that new partnership at your firm, we need cash. Your mother is sitting on your father's old investments and that huge house. She's getting old. What if she gets sick and spends all that money on medical bills? You need to take control of her accounts before it's too late." I held my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs, waiting for my son to defend me. I waited for him to say, "No, that's my mother's money." Instead, there was a long silence. Then David spoke in a low, cold voice. "I know, Vanessa, but she's stubborn. She won't just hand over the signing rights to the estate. I need to find a way to make her sign." I stood in the dark hallway, the cold glass of water shaking in my hand. The boy I had protected from the world was now plotting with a stranger to rob me blind. But that wasn't the worst part. The manipulation didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing process. David and Vanessa started visiting the house together almost every day. Suddenly, the atmosphere in my own home turned toxic. They started making me feel like I was losing my mind. It started with small things. I would place my reading glasses on the kitchen counter, and an hour later, they would be in the bathroom cabinet. I would lock the front door at night, and in the morning, David would storm into my room, yelling that I left the house wide open and endangered their safety. "Mom, you're getting forgetful," David said one morning, slamming a coffee mug on the table. His eyes were devoid of the warmth they used to have. "Yesterday you left the stove on. Vanessa had to turn it off. You're becoming a hazard to yourself in this house." "David, I swear I turned it off," I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes. "I am very careful with the kitchen." "Are you?" Vanessa chimed in, walking into the room with a smirk playing on her lips. "Margaret, elderly care is nothing to be ashamed of. Sometimes the brain just gets tired. David and I are just worried about your future." They were gaslighting me. They were intentionally moving things, unlocking doors, and creating scenarios to make it look like I was developing dementia. I would sit in my bedroom for hours, crying, looking at my hands, wondering if I really was losing my mechanical sharpness. The emotional pain was suffocating. My own son was looking at me not as a mother, but as an obstacle blocking his path to a luxury life with his girlfriend. Then, the emotional abuse turned financial. David came to my room with a stack of legal papers. "Mom, because of your recent forgetfulness, the bank needs us to set up a joint power of attorney. It's just a safety measure so I can handle the utility bills and property taxes for you. Sign here." I looked at the documents. My years of doing accounting work for the textile mill instantly kicked in. I didn't need my reading glasses to see what this paper really was. It wasn't just a utility management form. It was a complete transfer of control over my bank accounts and the deed to the house. He thought I was an ignorant old woman who would just trust her son blindly. I looked up at David. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He was looking at the floor, shifting his weight uncomfortably. Behind him, standing in the doorway, Vanessa was watching like a hawk, nodding her head slowly, urging me to sign. In that exact moment, a strange realization washed over me. The sadness in my heart turned into something else. It turned into a cold, hard clarity. My son was gone. The boy I raised had been completely consumed by greed and manipulation. If I didn't protect myself, they would destroy me completely. I took the pen. I looked at David one last time, hoping for a spark of regret. There was none. So, I signed the paper. But I didn't sign it with my legal signature. I used a variation that I knew would buy me exactly 30 days before the forensic audit at the bank flagged it. I needed those 30 days. Because I thought the nightmare was over, but it was only about to get worse. 2 weeks after I signed those papers, I woke up to the sound of loud voices downstairs. I walked down the steps to find 2 burly men packing my living room furniture into cardboard boxes. My old rocking chair, the family albums, the painting David drew for me when he was 7 years old. Everything was being thrown into plastic bins. David was standing by the door, wearing a brand new designer suit. Vanessa was next to him, scrolling through a luxury real estate app on her phone, laughing. "David, what is happening?" I asked, my voice trembling as I gripped the banister. David turned around. His face was a mask of cold indifference. "Mom, we sold the house. The closing is next week. Vanessa and I found a beautiful penthouse downtown, closer to my office." My breath caught in my throat. "You sold the house? But where am I supposed to go? This is my home, David." "We found a great place for you, Margaret," Vanessa said, walking over with a fake sweet smile that made my skin crawl. "It's a specialized facility called Autumn Grace. They have 24-hour staff, communal activities, and medical care. It's much better for someone in your fragile condition." "An old age home?" I whispered, looking at my son. "David, please. You are putting your own mother in a home? I sacrificed my entire life so you could have this estate. You can't do this to me." "Mom, stop making a scene," David shouted, his voice echoing through the empty walls of the house. "I have a career to think about. Vanessa and I are trying to build a future, and I can't keep coming back here to check if you forgot to turn off the oven or if you wandered outside. The decision is made. Your bags are already in the car." The emotional breakdown I experienced in that moment is something I cannot describe in words. It felt like a physical dagger entering my chest. I looked at the boy I had held in my arms when he had high fevers, the boy I had protected from every harsh winter, and he was treating me like a pieces of junk that needed to be cleared out before the new owners arrived. They didn't even let me pack my own personal items. Vanessa handed me a single suitcase containing a few old dresses and my medication. As they drove me to Autumn Grace, nobody spoke in the car. David stared straight ahead at the road, while Vanessa played with her expensive diamond ring, a ring I knew was bought with the money from my joint account. When we arrived at the bleak gray building of the old age home, David didn't even walk me inside. He just handed the suitcase to the nurse at the front desk. "Take care of yourself, Mom," he said, turning around without even giving me a hug. I watched their luxury car speed away into the rainy evening, leaving me behind in the cold. I stood there, looking like a broken, helpless victim. But as the iron gates of the facility closed behind me, the tears stopped falling. Then I discovered the truth about their financial moves, and I knew it was time to activate my secret plan. They thought putting me in an old age home would keep me quiet. They thought I would just sit in a rocking chair, knitting sweaters, and slowly fading away. But they forgot one crucial detail about my past. I wasn't just a mother. I was a professional accountant who spent 20 years managing complex financial structures for a textile empire. I knew how money moved, and more importantly, I knew how to make it disappear. The day after I arrived at Autumn Grace, I didn't join the other residents for television time. I walked straight to the facility's small library, which had an old computer with an internet connection. I sat down, my shaking hands suddenly turning steady as I logged into my private, hidden digital accounts. You see, David thought that my father's inheritance and the house deed were my only assets. He had no idea that over the last 15 years, I had quietly invested a portion of my corporate accounting bonuses into a private, independent offshore trust fund registered under my maiden name, Margaret Vance. When David forced me to sign that power of attorney 2 weeks ago, I knew exactly what he was planning. So the very next morning, while he was asleep, I had already executed a sweeping financial transaction. I pulled every single dollar out of our joint savings accounts, liquefied my father's old stock options, and funneled them straight into that private trust. The money David saw in the bank account when he checked it online was just a ghost balance, a temporary digital hold that would completely vanish the moment the bank processed the signature mismatch I had intentionally created. But I didn't stop there. I needed to know exactly what David and Vanessa were doing with the money from the house sale. Through a trusted friend who still worked at the real estate registry office, I obtained the closing documents for the sale of my suburban home. What I found made me gasp. David hadn't just sold the house to buy a penthouse. Vanessa had convinced him to put the entire payout from the house sale into a high-risk, unregulated offshore cryptocurrency investment firm managed by her own brother. It was a massive financial scam designed to wash the money and put it entirely under Vanessa's name, leaving David with nothing but debt. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating David to get rid of me. She was setting up David to rob him of everything he owned. She was going to dump him the moment the funds cleared into her brother's accounts. I sat back in the plastic chair of the library, staring at the screen. A deep, heavy sadness washed over me for my son's stupidity, but I knew that the only way David would ever learn his lesson was if he hit rock bottom. I had to let the trap spring. I had to let him see the true face of the woman he traded his mother for. I picked up the phone and made a single call to a senior investigator at the Federal Tax Enforcement Bureau, a man whose company accounts I had audited cleanly for a decade. "Henry," I said, my voice cold and precise, "I have a major financial fraud case for you, and I have all the receipts ready." 3 weeks passed. To David and Vanessa, everything seemed perfect. They had moved into a magnificent rental penthouse overlooking the harbor. They bought expensive champagne, hosted lavish parties for David's corporate friends, and bragged about their upcoming multi-million-dollar investments. David felt like the king of the world. He had successfully removed his forgetful mother, sold the old property, and was now living the elite lifestyle he always dreamed of. Every time he called Autumn Grace to check if I was still there, it wasn't out of love. It was just to confirm that I hadn't left the facility to cause trouble at his office. "Mom, are you settling in?" David asked during a brief 2-minute phone call. I could hear the loud music and laughter of a party playing in his background. "I am doing just fine, David," I replied calmly, sitting in my neat room. "The staff is very attentive. How is your new life?" "It's amazing, Mom. Vanessa and I are closing on our big investment venture tomorrow morning. The money from the house sale is going to triple within a month. I told you, I know how to handle these things better than you do." "I am sure you do, son," I said softly. "Just remember, money that comes fast can leave even faster." David let out an arrogant laugh. "Don't worry about me, Mom. Just enjoy your retirement." He hung up the phone. He had no idea that while he was pouring champagne for his guests, federal agents were already sitting in an unmarked van outside his apartment building, downloading every single transaction record from Vanessa's brother's server. I had given them the complete encryption keys, the account routing numbers, and the proof that the investment firm was a fraudulent shell corporation used for illegal activities. The federal authorities weren't just going to freeze the accounts, they were going to raid the corporate office right at the moment of the final wire transfer. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. The next morning, David and Vanessa walked into the grand private conference room of the downtown investment bank, ready to sign the final papers to transfer the entire family estate value into Vanessa's brother's hands. They thought they were touching the stars, but that wasn't the worst part. They had no idea who was already waiting for them inside that room. The conference room was magnificent, featuring floor-to-ceiling glass windows and a massive marble table. Vanessa's brother, a slick man in an expensive gray suit, was sitting at the head of the table with a laptop open. Vanessa was standing beside him, her eyes sparkling with greed as she looked at the digital transfer document. David walked in, looking proud, holding a leather briefcase. "All right, let's finish this," David said, sitting down and pulling out his golden pen. "Once this wire transfer goes through, our future is secure." "Just sign right here, David," Vanessa whispered, leaning over his shoulder, her fingers rubbing his neck in a manipulative gesture. "This is for us, for our luxury life." Before David's pen could touch the paper, the heavy mahogany doors of the conference room swung open. David looked up, expecting a bank executive. Instead, his mouth fell open in absolute shock. I walked into the room. I wasn't wearing the old, faded dress from the old age home. I was wearing my sharp, professional black corporate suit, the one I used to wear when I handled million-dollar audits. My hair was tied back neatly, and my eyes were sharp and piercing. Behind me walked Henry, the senior federal investigator, along with 3 uniformed police officers. "Mom?" David stammered, standing up so fast his chair flew backward. "What are you doing here? How did you get out of Autumn Grace? Security! Who let this woman in?" "Sit down, David," I said, my voice echoing through the silent room with an authority he hadn't heard since he was a child. "Margaret, you are being ridiculous," Vanessa snapped, her face turning ugly as her perfect plan began to derail. "You belong in a care facility. You are mentally unstable. David, call the police right now." "The police are already here, Vanessa," I said, pointing calmly to the officers standing at the door. "But they are not here for me." Henry walked forward and slammed a heavy folder of legal documents right onto the marble table, directly over the wire transfer papers. "Vanessa Miller and Marcus Miller," Henry announced in a loud, commanding voice. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and operating an illegal offshore financial scam. Officers, take them into custody." Vanessa's face turned completely white. She looked at her brother, who was already putting his hands up in the air. "David, do something. This old woman is lying. She's trying to ruin us," Vanessa screamed as a police officer stepped forward and placed cold steel handcuffs around her wrists. David stood there, completely paralyzed, looking back and forth between his girlfriend and his mother. Mom, what is happening? What fraud? That's the money from our house sale. No, David, I said, walking closer to him, looking directly into his terrified eyes. That was my money. The money you tried to steal from the mother who gave you everything. The room descended into utter chaos. Vanessa was screaming obscenities as the officers dragged her out of the room. She didn't look like a glamorous girlfriend anymore. She looked like a caught criminal, spitting insults at David as she passed him. You idiot, Vanessa yelled at David. You couldn't even manage your own mother. You ruined everything. David looked like he had been hit by a train. He sank back into his chair, his hands shaking violently as he looked at the empty space where his dream life used to be. The door slammed shut, leaving just David, Henry, and me in the massive, quiet room. Mom, David whispered, his voice cracking, tears finally leaking down his pale face. I don't understand. The bank accounts. The house money. The house money is gone, David, I said, sitting down across from him at the table. The moment you put it into Vanessa's brother's company, it was flagged as fraudulent funds. The federal government has seized the entire amount from the house sale as part of the asset forfeiture program. You sold my home for nothing. David gasped, burying his face in his hands, sobbing out loud. No, please. I am ruined. I have no place to live. My job. If the firm finds out about a federal investigation, I will be fired by tonight. I have nothing left. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with desperation, reaching across the table to grab my hands. Mom, please, you have to help me. Use your accounting skills. Find a loophole. You always protect me. You always fix my mistakes. I am your son. I slowly pulled my hands away from his grip, looking at him with a mixture of pity and cold finality. I used to have a son, David, I said softly, the silence of the room amplifying my words. But that son died the night he whispered in the dark with a stranger, planning to make his mother look insane just to take her money. That son died the day he packed my life into plastic bins and dropped me at an old age home without even a backward glance. I was blinded, Mom. Vanessa manipulated me, he cried out, begging on his knees now. Vanessa didn't force you to look down on me, David. Your own greed did that, I said, standing up and smoothing down my suit jacket. You thought you could control my money. You thought because I was old I was stupid. You had no idea that while you were playing games with my life, I was quietly preparing your lesson. I picked up my leather purse, turning my back on him. The federal investigation will clear your name from the criminal fraud because you were just an ignorant tool in their plan, I said, walking towards the door. But the money from the house is gone forever. You will have to start from the absolute bottom, in a tiny apartment, working a normal job, paying off your debts. You will finally learn what it means to work for your bread. Mom, where am I supposed to go tonight? David shouted after me, his voice broken and full of regret. I stopped at the doorway, looking back over my shoulder one last time. I hear there's an open room at Autumn Grace, David. The blankets are thin and the rooms are cold. Maybe it will help you remember what a mother's love was worth. True justice isn't about seeing your enemies suffer in a prison cell. True justice is about restoring the balance of respect and honor. I didn't go back to Autumn Grace that night. I checked out of the facility, thanking the kind nurses who had given me tea during my short stay. I took a taxi to a beautiful, quiet cottage by the countryside, a property I had purchased through my private offshore trust fund months ago, a place David knew nothing about. As I sit on my new porch tonight, watching the soft rain fall over the green gardens, I feel a deep, profound sense of peace. The storm has passed. My son David lost his high-paying corporate job due to the scandal. He now lives in a cramped, one-room studio apartment in the lower district, working 2 shifts as a basic clerk just to pay his monthly rent. He calls my old number every week, leaving crying voicemails, begging for forgiveness, asking if he can come visit me. Maybe one day, when his pride is completely washed away by the reality of hard work, I will answer the phone. But not today. Today, he needs to learn how to be a human being first. This journey taught me a valuable lesson, a lesson that everyone listening to my voice should hold close to their heart. Never mistake someone's kindness for weakness. Never assume that because a mother sacrifices her life for her children, she does not have the strength to stand up and defend her dignity when crossed. Wealth can be built, mansions can be sold, and luxury lifestyles can vanish in seconds. But a pure soul, honor, and the truth will survive every single storm. If you enjoy emotional drama stories, subscribe for more. Thank you for listening to this episode of Revenge Episodes. Stay strong, protect your heart, and remember that justice always finds its way home.